Joining us now, color of Change President and Executive Director Rashad Robinson. Rashad, so much has changed since you were on our air over a month ago now. Specifically, not only have you gone to nearly 1,000 advertisers to back your boycott of Facebook, but also Facebook just released its civil rights audit, which many would say was also very disappointing. Where do things stand now, and do you see Facebook taking action after that audit has been released?
Well, we've seen some minor sort of steps by Facebook. We've seen them announce a new vice president of civil rights, which is something that was similar to what we've been demanding. We've been pushing for something in the C-suite, and they've come back with something at the VP senior level. But it is does have the potential to have some long-term sort of infrastructure, which we've asked for. As far as the other demands, we continue to get Facebook, I think, pushing us on this idea that they are working so hard, that they are fixing these problems, that they are doing much better than the other social media platforms, only to sort of see the results not actually pan out in user experience. The fact that, as you said, about 1,000 corporations have stood with this boycott. Many brands that no one would call social justice warriors are standing with social justice leaders in this moment because everyone recognizes the threat that Facebook provides if they're not reined in. Corporations don't want their ads and their brands showing up to white nationalist content, and to have to hear Mark Zuckerberg sort of talk about how he's not going to be held accountable or he's not going to make any changes. And so, we are going to continue to push. Mark Zuckerberg has to testify July 27th in front of Congress on antitrust. There's going to be ongoing pushing and engagement. The demands from the civil rights community are out there, and now their own internal report, the audit, actually lists a whole set of things that they should be doing. And the question will be is, are they going to do them?
Well, I guess that's the question, because Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg have said explicitly multiple times that they do not want to fold to advertiser pressure. But do you think that the fact that this audit was something that they commissioned themselves, it means that's more likely to lead to change? Or do you think it'll be pressure on the antitrust front?
Well, the fact that I was meeting with them the other day was a direct result of the advertiser boycott. They reached out and asked for the meeting with Jonathan Greenblatt from the ADL, Derek Johnson from NAACP, Jessica Gonzalez from Free Press, and myself. They asked for that meeting. We didn't ask for that meeting with them. We were moving a boycott. And I mean, in the meeting, they said they were not going to sort of move on advertiser pressure, but we were going into that meeting with a really clear indication that there would be no sort of addition of a high-level civil rights person on the staffing. And even the words that we were sort of hearing, even as the audit was closing up, that wouldn't be the case, only for them to tell us in the meeting that was one of the things that they were going to do. And so when a company sort of professes in big ways that they're not sort of going to answer the calls of your campaign while sort of asking for meetings, responding in the press, and sort of trying to do some things around the edges, you know that they are at the very least having to deal with some level of pressure. And everything we know about what's happening at Facebook is that staff are speaking out, that the people on the outside, consumers, are speaking out, and users, and the advertisers are speaking out. And at some point, the government is also going to have to lean in, and well, July 27th could be that moment.
I want to get your perspective on objectionable content because Facebook likes to have global policies. It operates in some countries where protest speech might be judged objectionable by the governments of those countries. Have you thought about how Facebook and maybe other social media platforms should thread that needle?
Yeah, I mean, we've actually have a coalition called Change the Terms, which has thought about this a lot. We've also been in deep conversation with folks around the world. Right now, actually, to that point, one of the big problems at Facebook that doesn't exist the same way at some of the other platforms is that Facebook doesn't really have a wall between their government and policy relations, their global sort of relations with governments around the world and here in the U.S., and the sort of decisions that are made about objectionable content, especially when it involves political leaders. And so that's what happens when Donald Trump puts that looters and shooters post up in relationship to sort of the protests and the uprisings after George Floyd, a post that actually does violate the four corners of the policies. Mark Zuckerberg picks up the phone and calls and talks to Donald Trump and tells Donald Trump that he's, maybe crossing the line, that he's, maybe in violation, but never pulls down the post. It's sort of the way that, like, maybe if your father is the police chief, he calls you and tells you to not do something that you're doing or skirt something under the rug when the kid down the street actually ends up going to jail for the same thing. And so part of the problem is that Facebook's incentive structures are flawed, because at the end of the day, the people who are in charge with moderating this content around politicians are also in charge with maintaining relationships with them. And that means that it can't actually be the type of platform that rises up voices and allows for all of us to be heard.
When it comes to, speaking of bringing things down, I mean, the removal of these pages associated with Roger Stone, with Bolsonaro's sons in Brazil, Boogaloo. I mean, when do those stop being things, in your words, at the edge and start being actual positive change from your point of view?
Oh, they're total positive change. And we've been asking for that for 4 years, and we leave out the meeting and then they do it. And so this is not right. This is not an issue of not giving them credit. This is about them actually getting a policy in place that my nonprofit and other nonprofits are not having to sit around and point out things for years, and then they suddenly decide that it violates their policy. There was nothing new on Roger Stone's page that should have forced it to be pulled down that wasn't there sort of years ago. And so this is the reason why this is around the edges. It's because this is not enforcement related to a policy. This is enforcement related to pressure. We actually need policies and rules of the road that are scalable over the time. So it doesn't actually rely on organizations like mine to be sort of pressuring Facebook. There are so many sort of racial justice issues I can be dealing with every day. I want Facebook to have rules of the road. There are 2.6, they have 2.6 billion users, more followers than Christianity. They should have their own policies.
Well, Rashad, we are out of time, but we hope you will come back and continue to talk to us about these issues. We know this is going to really be a hot button issue and one to watch ahead of the election. Rashad Robinson, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks.